Good Up is our space to talk about those experiences in life we didn't know we all had in common. We're the after work happy hour conversation with your best friend.
You good up bad, like, hello.
The place where you bring up the hard parts of life, the ones that made you laugh, and the things that made you who you are. Because who said becoming good up wasn't a little bit uncomfortable? Stay tuned for more information about this week's episode. Hey, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of the Good Up podcast. Hi, Deidre.
Hey, girl, hey.
What are we talking about today, Deidre?
Y'all, I'm gonna just be honest, it's heavy. Somebody gonna cry at least once. If it's not me or Heiza, it's gonna be one of y'all.
I hope it's me, because I feeling all types of shit today, and I know that it relates to the topic. So
yeah, we're talking about our inner children, our inner pick-me.
Inner pick-me. What if I name the episode that Inner
Pick-me? I actually like that. I think that's a good episode title. Inner Pick-me.
You know what? When we do merch, we need to put I am healing my inner pick-me.
Oh, yes, please. You know what? That's a good follow-up. The accountability is necessary. We need to start moving forward on merch. We talked about it on the show.
Yes.
Inner Pick-me. Yes. We're going to have the Inner Pick-me line. And we need a bucket hat, because you know my bucket hat. Hey!
We're going to walk on the march. We're going to walk on the march.
It's coming,
yes.
Don't worry. So
today is the Inner Pick-me episode.
Yeah, that's the episode, honey. How do you want to begin, Miss Mama?
So explain to the people who don't know, what is an inner child? What is this concept of an inner child?
So the long and short of it is and your inner child is a fragment of your personality. It's part of your subconscious. It's who, like, the child version of you still exists within you, just in your memory, in your personality, if that makes sense. A lot of the times, a good way to identify like your inner child and their impact in your life is how you respond to things that make you uncomfortable. Fight or flight is usually associated with your inner child. I recently had a whole like meltdown the other day. Me and my niece were having a conversation because she was like, yo, I think this situation that you're going through is your inner child is very triggered. And of course I burst into tears because she was 100% correct. So yeah, your inner child is a part of you that needs tending to on a regular basis, especially if you've experienced any level of trauma in childhood, that is. And
this is why I let you explain shit, because like, you know shit about shit, you know? And I would have just been like, your inner child is that little motherfucker inside you who'll be wilding.
You know what's funny? A lot of people's inner child will be wilding, but my inner child is a sensitive crybaby.
I think mine is very ragey, but also very sensitive. Like I'm on one end of the spectrum or the other. I either crying or I want to fight. Like there's no,
I believe it. I could see your inner child being very like, what the fuck? Like,
oh, she's very ragey.
Yeah. she's just very ragey.
She's a brat.
My inner child is that, you know, that kid who you really have to come down to their level and hug them and remind them that everything's okay and console them gently. That's my inner child. And I've had to, let me tell y'all something. The episode is about inner child healing work. It's so beautiful and painful all at the same time, because I literally sometimes have to talk to myself as a child. Deidre, it's okay. Like, I remember one time I was in my bed crying over something that really had me feeling away. And I recognized that it was essentially just my inner child feeling triggered and abandoned, right? And I had to literally talk myself through it. Like, D, it's okay. Like, the way you feel is okay. You know who's in charge of you? You are. Nobody else is in charge of you. I literally to talk to myself like that when I'm having those moments.
I had to do the same thing like yesterday. And you know, we were talking about that lady who called my job yesterday, and she was whiling and she was yelling. And so people talking to me crazy. Of course it upsets me, and of course I'd attack a good game and be like, bitch, I will fight you. But like, it actually does trigger me, and it'll scare the shit out of me. I don't like when people yell at me. I do not like
me
that.
Me neither. I hate it. So I don't like it either.
I literally had to, like, on my drive home, be like, hey, Isa, it's okay. She not gonna beat your ass. Like, and not to say like I'm actually scared of this invisible white lady, right?
Right.
But I was triggered by her reaction, and I was like, hey, she's not going to do anything to you. It's over. It's fine. Like, I literally have to like console myself like I'm consoling a child sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, be like, it's cool. So,
It's true.
I did my Googles. And
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And it's funny because I'm actually Googling something because there's a book I want to recommend by the end of the episode. I just want to make sure that I have the author's name correct. So you go ahead and share your Googles and I'll share mine.
So here are 5 signs of an inner child that needs healing. So we talked about what an inner child is. You kind of have the concept in mind, but how do you know that your inner child needs healing? Because not everyone's inner child needs healing, right?
Facts. That is 100% correct.
Every now and then you kind of have to connect with your inner child, but that does not necessarily mean that every person who listens to this episode has a broken inner child or something they need to fix, right? So one of the signs is that you are highly reactive. So like Deidre and I were talking about earlier, me being ragey or crying, right? Like I don't like being told what to do. I don't like people yelling at me. There's certain things I know that I don't like that I associate with me as a child because I was very much that person when I was younger.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself reacting very emotionally to a lot of things, it's more than likely something that is triggered within you from your childhood, right? And I don't like telling my husband business, but an example of this is that he has a very honest family, right? They're not honest to be mean on purpose, but they're very like, they will tell you about yourself real fast. Even as a kid, they'll be like, what the fuck you doing? Like, that's dumb. So me being a very like sarcastic person when we started dating, island people, like Caribbean people would speak the same way. But I didn't realize that this was a trigger for him and it made him feel inadequate sometimes. Like if I would come in a house and be like, Steven, why you leave the plate on the counter? That fuck makes sense. And we don't talk like that fuck makes sense. But for him, it was like, I questioned it.
It was you asking him if he's fucking dumb or not. Like,
yeah. So that
so
that
funny?
is a part of his inner child that I had to learn because
what's funny? Even though that's common home, I've never liked that. Even as a child, I always found that to be so awful.
Yeah, I mean, like in some ways it's funny, right? But thinking about the fact that sometimes we were kids and adults were speaking to us like this,
right?
Like, did I deserve that?
You did not. You did not deserve that shit.
Yeah. So, but essentially, his response to when I would joke or say things like that was very ragey, right? Like he would go from 0 to 100. I would be like, I don't understand why you are getting this upset. Later on in our relationship, obviously we grow about these things, but he revealed to me like, people when I was younger would always like make me feel like I was stupid about something, like if I didn't know something. So when you say these things, it makes me feel like blah, blah, blah. So I had to realize like, oh, that's his inner child that's like angry and ragey, like don't fucking talk to me like that, right?
Don't call me dumb, bitch. I'm an engineer.
Right? Don't call me.
Are you fucking so dumb?
So yeah, like that's an example of like highly reactive. Like you're highly sensitive to certain things. You don't really understand why. It could be something that seems simple to everyone else, but it triggers you and you become highly reactive to it. Yeah. The other thing is overvaluing independence. This one I relate to a whole lot because people who overvalue independence overvalue it because they don't trust anybody
to be like reliable
to come through for them
because the people who were supposed to come through for them in childhood did not.
And you and I can heavily relate to that.
Yes.
So yeah, overvaluing independence means that you set yourself up in a way, or you set your life up in a way to where you do not have to depend on other people, so that you prevent the possibility of that disappointment, of them either hurting you, disappointing you, not coming through. And that's a sign that your inner child needs healing. The third one, destructive coping mechanisms. I think for most people, that's like a very common, obvious one, right?
Like drinking, the drugs.
Yeah, you're abusing alcohol, you're abusing drugs.
Risky sex behaviors, things such as that,
Yeah, hypersexuality without, protecting yourself, things like that. Poor emotional and mental health. So even just your regular schmegular degular depression can be a sign of an inner child that needs healing. Anxiety can be a sign of an inner child that needs healing.
Oh, maybe dysregulation, like not being able to properly regulate your emotions, if that makes sense.
So that goes back to that highly reactive part of just like you go from 0 to 100, or you become very sad, or I know someone in my life who responds very, very negatively to any kind of feedback, even if it's general, just good feedback, or just like, hey, next time try this. Like, they respond very negatively, and it's very obvious to me that that's like inner child work that needs to be done. But I'm not a psychologist, so I would never say that to them.
Hit me up in a couple years.
Right.
I'll be the one to say, hey.
The last one they named was repeating patterns in relationships. So, mama, if you find that you keep dating all these men and they keep looking like ducks, quacking like ducks, but you're still like duck, then you probably have an inner child that needs healing.
Yeah, try some goose. Sorry, my inner child is a comedian.
Deidre said, try some goose, bitch.
Try some goose. Not great goose.
Yeah, those are all the things that, kind of tell you or give you signs that your inner child might need healing. Now, one thing I love to tell people, just because you've worked on something in the past does not mean that it will never become a problem ever again. So if you listening to this episode and saying, oh, I already healed my inner child, guess what, bitch? Your inner child might be pissed off at something tomorrow. Okay?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So this episode might still resonate. So my question for both of us is, what has your experience with your inner child been like? How did you arrive to a point where you were like, okay, I have an inner child that needs healing? Like, how did you discover that?
You know what? Ironically enough, my first time ever hearing anything about my inner child was several years ago. It was on a podcast, ironically enough. And one of the hosts, she was actively in therapy. And what she would do is she would bring little things that she learned in therapy to the show to kind of share with the listeners who didn't have access to therapy, which I would love to see us do something like that on the show. But in any case,
this whole show is my therapist.
Facts.
Shout out to you, girl.
That's a fact. So she was pretty much talking about the fact that her therapist was coaching her through healing her inner child. That was my first time ever hearing about it. At that point, that's when I learned what an inner child was. I hadn't necessarily done anything in particular for my inner child, but that's when the wheels in my head started turning, because I started to realize, because even that's when I learned the concept of the way you speak to yourself is the way the people who raised you spoke to you. And I started to be reflective and realize that, like, at the time when I would make basic mistakes, I would be so mean to myself. I would say so many fucked up things because that's what was done to me as a child. And so that's the first, I guess, efforts that I've made toward healing my inner child, without actively saying, yo, I'm healing my inner child, was me being more conscious of how I speak to myself when I make a mistake. So once I understood that, I said, okay, Deidre, now that you're aware of this, and you know that that inner voice is really the voice of those who poured into you and raised you, now you have to do something different, because you didn't deserve it then and you don't deserve it now. And you don't speak to your friends that way when they make mistakes, so you shouldn't speak to yourself this way when you make mistakes. So that would probably be the first thing I ever did, like, intently for my inner child. And Mia, listen, I don't tell people I don't have one child, I have two, Dylan and little Deidre. Like, I have two children. I am actively, like, parenting my inner child, because that's the journey I'm on now, is reparenting my inner child. Like, I'm the mama now. The fuck? Mm-hmm. I'm the mama, and little Deidre is very safe. Okay, she has a very comfortable living environment. We're gentle with her because she's sensitive. Okay, she's very sensitive. So
I'd be looking at little hairs. I'm like, bitch, can you relax? Like, calm down.
Yo, little Deidre is that bitch that's gonna cry when it's nap time. Like, you know that little toddler on the beach that was crying, talking about, I take a nap right here. That's Deidre. That's little Deidre. I'm going, if my physiological needs are not met, bitch, I'm crying. Okay. Like, I am
maybe I need to stop calling her bitch. That's the problem.
Yeah, start with that, because she's not.
I got my fucking nerves. Anyway.
Little Eliza.
So inner child healing, that whole concept is actually pretty new to me. And same thing, I think I discovered just this idea of an inner child on TikTok. Ironically, during the pandemic. Shout out to all of the therapists who have chosen to utilize TikTok to create content for people who don't have access to therapy, and kind of make us aware of all these things that we probably wouldn't have been aware. Yeah, that exist, and kind of make us feel affirmed in the things that we struggle with. But yeah, I can't remember exactly who the person was. It likely was a Black woman because y'all know.
That's the only people I
But
trust.
yeah, no ill will to white therapists, but I probably just scroll past your videos, and if I see a Black woman talking, I listen in. Started on TikTok, learned about it, and kind of haven't really like actively done the work, but I can identify like all those things that we were talking about earlier. Like, if you asked me to go through all 5, I could probably name one example per all those 5 like signs of a broken inner child. Like, I can name an example that I've done or I've dealt with in, you know, those buckets. So I know that I have inner child work to do. And it's funny because I've talked about it on the podcast in both a positive way and a negative way. So we've done a whole phase episode. Y'all know that I'm a very sex positive person now. But at the start of my whole phase, I firmly believe that that was probably inner child healing that needed to be done.
Yeah.
Because that hypersexuality came from somewhere, right? It wasn't just birthed out of just like, oh, yeah, I want to have sex now. You know, that highly reactive nature, all of that. You tend to end up parenting yourself the way that you were parented as a child, or you handle yourself as an adult that same way. So yeah, that's definitely one of the ways for me. Another thing for me is like abandonment is a huge trigger for me. If I feel like a friend is ditching me, if somebody ghosts me, if my phone dry for a couple of days, I don't get like depressed. Like,
oh God,
I legit
really?
I legit the get sad because I don't feel like people don't love me.
Oh, just like people don't love me. You don't kill me.
And that's probably my inner child like rationalizing it for herself, right? People aren't talking to me, so they must not love me. Like, nobody paying attention to me. As the youngest child, right? As somebody who used to be a brat and who used to lash out, I honestly think I was looking for attention because I felt like I wasn't getting it. So now it's like I spend a lot of time alone. I live in Arizona. My friends live in their own lives. Like, adult me is like, okay, Jay, people have shit to do.
Yeah.
But inner child me is like, nobody loves me.
Nobody loves me. Nobody's giving me attention. Like, what's going on?
And if, for example, if I'm not too long ago, I was working on a project with someone, and you know what I'm talking about. I put a lot of like effort into it with them. I got super passionate about it, and they decided not to continue the project, and I legit had like a mental breakdown because of it. And adult me, right now that I'm past everything, looking back, it's like, but why did that affect you so badly? Mentally, like, why did I get depressed, right? And I never told the person that it made me depressed because it wasn't her fault. She made a very rational decision. She didn't do it on purpose. She didn't mean to hurt my feelings.
It was just probably something that worked out better for her.
But I felt abandonment. And like I said, that's a huge trigger for me. That's a huge trigger for my inner child, both because of my parents' divorce, just because of things that I've gone through throughout my life that involved abandonment, right? I've been in a lot of relationships or in a lot of dating situations where I've just been ghosted, and it related to, especially when I was younger, it related to boys not wanting to publicly date a plus size girl. So I've been ghosted a lot in my life.
That's fucked up.
Right?
Yeah.
And like those feelings of abandonment, like they add up, right? So she made a decision. It was a very simple decision. And I legit, like, people were like, you ain't on social media anymore. Like, I legit had a mental, like, I was depressed.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You know, the thing is because, for one, I can understand how you feel, right? And how you felt. And I'm so proud of you for working through those emotions, the whole process of that, of having it happen at the moment, not knowing why you felt the way you felt, but knowing how you felt enough to reflect and realize the root of those feelings. That's really big. I'm also sitting here like, I really need to stop ghosting people.
Deidre said, bitch, I'm sorry. Deidre, no, I don't think you've ever ghosted me.
No, I've never ghosted you, but I'm sitting here thinking about the people who I have ghosted. And now I'm sitting here, I'm hearing the way you're explaining it from your side, and I'm like, because my inner child, like I said, is a softie and is non-confrontational. And so rather than saying, yo, this thing happened that hurt my feelings, I'm gonna just shut down. And in my adult life, what that looks like is me just blocking you, deleting you, the text thread, and all traces of you. And
shout out to the self-awareness, because like I appreciate that you are like looking at this as an opportunity to work on something, you know, within yourself, right? And recognizing like, oh, okay, this is how my inner child reacts to things, and it's not other people's fault all the time. Like with that situation, I didn't know if I wanted to be angry at this person. I didn't know, like, and I kind of had to reconcile, like, okay, this person didn't actually do anything to me on purpose. This is just how I reacted to that person making a decision that affected me. And I feel almost like I expected them to know how badly it affected me, and they were oblivious to it, and that wasn't their fault, because that, again, that was on me, and that's all like healing that I have to do. And it's ironic because at the time I was in therapy, and I never brought it up with my therapist, because again, when I get emotional about shit,
you shut down.
I shut down, and I'm like, I'll figure it out. But one thing that I did do is that was when I had started reading again, right? Without even realizing it, I did something that used to make me very, very happy as a child that I hadn't done in years, and I started reading again, right? So anybody who following me on social media knows that, like, when I start reading, I'd read, like, and as a kid, that was me. I would read book after book after book after book. So I was like, let me do this thing that I know used to bring me joy, right?
Yeah.
Let me do this thing that's not for creating content, that has nothing to do with work or making money. Like, let me just do this thing for fun. So, and I ironically, I did tell my therapist about that part. I was like, I'm reading again. She was like, okay, great. So did that. And that, I think that was actually what helped me like get through the difficult part of like that period of depression. And still trying to read, but my job to be like, ugh, but
you playing in your face.
So, you know, that was something I did for myself, knowing that at that point in time, my inner child just needed somebody to be there for her, and I needed to show up for myself.
Yes.
And I needed to start doing something that would like bring me joy and make me happy. So that's what I did. So what's something that you do when your inner child feels triggered, or in situations where you've realized like, okay, this is something that needs healing, that is related to my inner child? Like, what are some steps you've taken similar to that? Like, I know
doing something. So for one, and I know this sounds so basic, but it has to be done. I make sure my physiological needs are met. I make sure that I'm eating. I make sure that I'm getting adequate rest and hydrating and all that jazz. I literally treat myself like an infant. I literally go down the list. Has her diaper been changed? Has she been fed? Like things such as that. But on like a more leisurely level, I color. I have a collection of coloring books. I color. Sometimes I even go as far as sitting at my grandma's altar and coloring, because that lady colored until the day she died. And that was actually something she and I used to do together. Anytime I was in New York or anytime she was in St. Croix, we would color together. And so I sometimes sit at her altar and I color. I'll color a picture for her and put it on her altar. I'll color in my room, you know. Some other things I do is I listen to the music that I enjoyed when I was a kid. So that era when I wanted to be grown so bad, when Murder Inc. was really dominating the R&B scene, honey, I'll be listening to Ashanti and Ja Rule and them. Lately,
I am a Disney bitch. Like,
yeah, sometimes I even listen to Disney music. Like I'll listen to the music. Like I listen to the soundtracks from like the Disney movies, but more so I just do the things that I enjoyed doing when I was that age. Like I literally, on the way to work the other day, I was looking at music videos from 2002, things like that, you know. So those are the things that I do. I recently bought myself a pair of rollerblades, because that's, now that it's getting hot, I'm actually planning to go rollerblading. I had to return them because for whatever reason I couldn't figure out how to put the brake on. So I'm just gonna
you ain't just like hurt your ankle not too long ago?
Yeah, so I really need to be careful. I can't afford to break like my bones anymore. So I returned them, and I'm gonna go to like a sporting goods store and actually have them do it for me. So I'm just gonna make a day of it. And I love being in the city anyway. So I'm gonna go to New York and go to like one of the sporting goods stores and just make a whole day of it. But yeah, those are some of the things I do. I also eat the snacks that I enjoyed as a kid as well. I just do things that make me remember what it felt like to be in that time, because I have this way of like being able to feel the energy of different time zone time periods and stuff. So
but that makes a lot of sense though. So when I looked up like things you can do to work on your inner child, nurturing your creativity was the first thing that was listed in most of the articles I read, right? And it doesn't mean that you have to be this like super creative person. Nurturing your creativity can be as simple as what Deidre said, coloring. If you knew you enjoyed coloring as a child, sitting down and first of all, coloring as an adult is like the most calm shit.
So dope.
We have a coloring booth at my job. So
oh, that's so dope.
yeah, my our CEO thought of it, and she's just like so friggin' amazing. I hope to God she's not listening to this podcast, but shout out to you.
I think I might do that. I think I might bring some coloring books to work and leave them in our break room. I think my colleagues would really enjoy that.
So we have these like phone booths at work that are for private meetings, and they took one of them and got like not a coloring book, but like a huge sheet of paper with coloring like outlines on it to color. And they left like a crayon box, and they put a note on the door that was like, if you need a minute, like this is our coloring booth, right? And at first I was like, what the fuck?
No, that's dope as hell.
But the other day when that woman went to Alpha Me on the phone, guess what I did? As soon as I hung up the phone, I went in the coloring booth and I started to color. Because I was like, if I don't color, I cuss at everybody.
Facts. Let me tell you, coloring gets me through some shit, honey.
Yeah. So I went in there and I colored, and it was like, wow, like this is actually something that's like, I see why, they make kids color and shit at restaurants so that they could keep their mind on something.
Yeah.
But another thing I do, like I said earlier, Disney music. I will sing my little heart out in my car to some Disney music. I love, especially the Disney Renaissance period. So Lion King, Tarzan, Mulan.
That's what I'll be listening to. That's what I'll be listening to.
Shit, okay.
That's what I'll be listening to.
As an adult, right? It's not only difficult to acknowledge that you even have an inner child, it's hard to convince yourself that that inner child deserves like your attention and your time. And
consistently too.
I think that was the hardest thing that I had to come to terms with, was like, oh, if I'm actually going to like practice this concept of inner child healing, like the first thing I have to do is acknowledge that my inner child deserves that. Like,
oof, yeah.
And that was hard because I was
it was easy for me.
It was hard because for me it was just like, okay, hey Isabel, you're grown. Like,
really?
Sure. I was very dismissive of it at first because I was like, I don't have time for this shit. I have to go to work. I have to do all this other stuff. Like, the concept of inner child healing was just like, But then again, when I got depressed, I was like, okay, I need to try something.
Yeah.
So let's try this. It didn't fix everything, and I'm still working.
It's a factor.
It definitely is. It definitely is. So.
You know what's so funny? Because even as we're talking about it, something as simple as a smell of incense soothes my inner child. Because my mom used to light incense a lot. And even as a kid, I used to love the smell of incense. And she would let me like take the incense to the room that she wanted me to put them in. So she would light it and tell me, go put this like in the living room, and I used to love it. And I used to be like waving it around. And it's so funny because Dylan does the same thing now. He loves lighting incense, and he does the same thing I used to do, like treat it like a magic wand and watch the smoke come out. And then it's just so fun. And I'm just like, now, like, granted, I'd be like in incense for many reasons. One, because I like the smell. Two, because I want to use the smoke to communicate with my ancestors and all that jazz. But it's just my inner child. Listen.
But that's a good thing to do too, is like, because you and I both know, like, we have difficult relationships with certain family members, but there are still happier memories that you have as a child with those people. So kind of like channeling those happier memories. So for example, for me, I used to love when my mother would start cleaning the house on a weekend and play like La India or like Salt and Salsa Singers or like Mark Anthony out. So now when I don't play that music, like it'll
think of those days.
Yeah, because she was always in a good ass mood when she would be like cleaning and playing that music, and my mother could sing her ass off. So like Celine Dion was like our,
my mom was a huge Celine Dion fan. Yeah.
So listening to Celine Dion, like thinking about like how my mother used to sing it, and like, me and my sisters used to sing it with her. And like all of that stuff, I'll do that to be like, okay, I need to put myself in a good mood. So like, how can I do that? Like,
yeah, those things are nice. And those little things are fun. So I even tend to listen to the music my mom used to listen to when I was a kid sometimes, when I need that source of like comfort and upliftment.
So what's another way that we can work on healing, or what is a simple way to connect with your inner child? So outside of just like doing those things that make you happy, what's a way to kind of even like, actually that is one way, acknowledging them.
That's the part, acknowledging them.
I answered my own question.
Literally acknowledging that they exist.
Yeah.
And the moment that I acknowledge my inner child, even though I was doing the work years ago of watching how I spoke to myself, the first time I truly like acknowledged my inner child and spoke to myself, to my inner child, was that time I was in the bed crying my eyes out. This was like 2 years ago. I was in bed crying my eyes out. And then I just started speaking to myself as I was talking to a child. And I started to feel so much better. And ever since then, I realized you need to do this more. You need to work with your inner child more. She's a part of you. She's not this outside entity. She's a part of you. Little Deidre is a part of you. So sometimes I realize when my inner child needs attention. Sometimes I feel like out of balance, especially if I'm not creating. And creativity looks different for me because I'm so creative in so many ways, right? So sometimes it could be like me coloring. Other times it could be like me baking, things like that. But honey, if I haven't given myself time to just do creative things leisurely and not for like a check, I'll be in my feelings. If there's no like pleasure in my life, if I'm just doing things that have to be done and I'm not doing anything that's just enjoyable, even down to like watching some damn TV, if I'm not doing something that brings me joy, like we've been saying all episode, my inner child be acting the fool. And you know what? This is a good segue into, we have our inner child, but we also have an outer child. And our outer child is the actual reactions. So yeah, our inner child will experience something and then react, but the reaction itself is our outer child. This
is actually the first time I'm hearing that.
Well, I learned about it maybe like a year ago. And I learned, there's a book called Taming Your Outer Child by, I think her name is Susan, let me double check. Susan Anderson. And it's literally how to manage the emotions that you feel and how to channel them in a more healthy way. Because the thing is the feelings that our inner child feels are all valid, but it's how we respond. In my case, I could sit here and say, you know what? My outer child is just going to go ghost. I'm just going to delete the conversation, delete your number, block you on everything, and act like you never existed. I'm just going to cover my eyes. But it doesn't make it okay. So rather than like when my inner child feels triggered or abandoned or whatever the case is, the healthier way to deal with that is, for one, to acknowledge that those feelings exist and that they're real. And I have a right to those feelings, but to channel those feelings in a more healthy way by simply telling the person that what they just did hurt my feelings and this is why. You know what I mean?
I have such a hard time doing that.
So do I. So that's what I'm learning how to do. And a big part of it is because, and we know why, we worry about that person essentially gaslighting us and telling us that we're too sensitive or that we read it wrong or
that person kind of advocating for themselves in their response, and then me feeling bad for making them feel bad. Even like, that. Even I'd be like, okay, sorry, never mind. My feelings
never mind, my bad.
Okay.
I should have never done that. I never even thought about how that would have impacted you.
Yeah, I am the queen of that shit.
I had to call a coworker out on that yesterday because he was being so hard on himself for being clumsy, because he tends to bump into things a lot and knock things over a lot, and he was so hard on himself. And it's like, I had to
That's probably his inner child.
Yeah, and literally, you know what I did? I treated him like a kindergartner, right? So he dropped like a bunch of these little like stopper stick things, and he felt so bad. I said, dude, this is a multi-million-dollar company. This ain't even a drop in the bucket. And I literally kicked some of them across the floor. I was like, don't nobody give a damn about these. I said, let's just sweep them up and move on. Like, you're fine. Like, don't even beat yourself up about this dumb shit. Like, are you kidding me? Like, not when your role here is so important. Like, you keep this motherfucker going. Fuck these sticks. Like, I was like, don't worry about that.
You know what's interesting is I found myself doing the same thing with my employees, like as I work on my own inner child work, I've kind of taken it into how I manage people.
Yes,
And
it's
like
good.
you just said, sometimes, so that person that I was talking about is one of my teammates, right? In terms of just like how he reacts to feedback. And I don't know his backstory. I don't know why feedback kind of, you know, hurts him the way that it does. But what I always try to do is like tell him he's doing a good job. I always try to affirm him in his work. I always try to make sure that I clearly recognize like when he does something right, I'm just like, great job. Like, and
that's amazing. Yeah.
for some people, I think they'll probably feel like, okay, well, he's an adult and you're in a workplace, so you don't always have to coddle him. But to me, it's
But
not
that's
even
not coddling him. That's giving
It's like-
recognition where it's due.
It is. And then again, but you know, in tying it into this conversation, you never know how people were treated by the people that raised them, right?
Oof, that's
you
it
never
right
know
there.
what people are carrying around with them. Like I said about my husband, like I was saying things to him at the time that I thought was like nothing because of the people that raised me, and it was hurting him because of the people that raised him, you know?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
So with my teammates, like I try to make sure like I'm telling them, you know, you're doing a great job. The other thing I try to do is apologize to them very clearly when I know that I'm wrong.
Yes.
Because a lot of us grew up with parents
who did not apologize.
did not apologize for shit. So a lot of what we deal with in terms of our inner child too kind of ties back to how our parents handled being wrong. And we act the same way when it comes to being wrong. Sometimes a lot of us don't like to apologize, but a lot of us also don't expect apologies from other people. We kind of just internalize shit, deal with it, cope in however the way we coped when we were younger, and we move the fuck on, right?
Yeah, it's true.
So, you know, the other day I was tripping about something at work, and I know I was tripping, because while I was tripping in my head, I was like, you know, you tripping, right? Like, and don't get me wrong, I had a valid point, but the way that I was trying to communicate it afterwards, I felt like a brat. I felt like, okay, Heza, you still was trying to get away in this situation, and they were just trying to explain to you like, okay, but we see it this way, and you were like, okay, but I see it this way. So afterwards, you know, we came to a middle ground, and we came back to like our team area, and I was like, guys, I apologize. I didn't mean to push so hard. I was like, I'm just trying to make sure that I understand what it is that we're doing, but I apologize for the way that I delivered that, because, you know, I don't ever want to be the person that stresses you out at work. So they were like, no, you're fine, everything's cool. I was like, no, seriously, like let's just speak honestly. As a team, you could tell me when I'm being an asshole, it's fine. So, you know, they were laughing, but I wanted to make sure I did that because younger me did not receive that. Like,
yeah.
And me and you were just talking about that earlier in before we start recording. Like, I was not raised by people who apologize. So
Same.
I'm really trying to learn how to do it in my relationship, in you know, at work. I don't know that I'm gonna have kids, but if I do someday, like,
then yeah,
I really want to make sure
funny?
I do that.
I too was not raised by people who apologize, and I actually I over apologized. Notice I pluralized that, like past tense, because I had to learn from that. But what I did realize is I would feel resentment when people didn't apologize to me. I would end up in situations where I would end up with people around people who didn't apologize. So when they didn't, like, for me, I don't solicit apologies. So when people didn't apologize, when I tell you, I would be infuriated. Like, there would be like this boiling inside of me, because for me, I used to over apologize, and now I apologize when an apology is due. Like, I have it's funny, I have no problem apologizing to people. I have no problem. Like, I'm the person, I'm like, tell me if I did anything wrong. I have no problem apologizing to people.
And y'all gonna get tired of me saying, and that goes back to your inner child, but I don't think people realize like how many things are so deeply rooted in the way that we were raised.
Yes.
The way that you interact with others, the way that you treat yourself, the way that you navigate, you know, those special relationships in your life. The person you bring with you to your workplace can be affected by the way that your childhood went. Even if you think you had a great childhood, something so small and simple. You'll hear me 2 weeks ago in the friggin' episode where we played We're Not Really Strangers, talking about that bitch who tell me I couldn't be a marine biologist. Still upset about that.
Just hurt my heart every time I think about that fuck. I get upset. Like, that's what, you know, I went to bed thinking about that fuck that night here.
No, like, you should have seen our followers. They were like, who the fuck tell you couldn't be a marine
biologist?
Yeah,
like I really fucking hate that lady. Like,
I
mad as hell.
I really appreciate
Oh
that
no,
you're
that's a
writing out for
man.
me.
That was
Yeah,
me,
it was
but yeah,
it was a
that
man.
dude.
But
You know
like,
what? Something that's semi-related is our attachment style. And our
Exactly.
attachment style is directly tied into our inner child, because our attachment style is formed in infancy.
Exactly. So yeah, like there is a benefit to all of this. You, again, everything we talk about on this podcast, right? You don't have to do the work. Nobody forcing you to go deep down into your soul and acknowledge all of the triggers and traumas that you have. But there are benefits to this type of work. So inner child work is important because it can allow you to discover like what those causes of, you know, the way you react to things are, right? A lot of us deal with things like repressed emotions and self-deprecation, like you were saying about that guy who you work with who was like super hard on himself. A lot of us have unmet needs from childhood that still haven't been fulfilled. So I kind of want to talk about that. Like, what is something that in your inner child work you realized was an unmet need from when you were younger?
Reassurance and like physical affection. Like off the top.
I don't even have to answer separately. Like exactly the same. Physical affection and for people to like verbally express that they love me, and for me to do that for myself.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? I always knew that my mother loved me. I don't remember, and I'm sure she said it, but I don't remember her just randomly saying it, if that makes sense. I have memories of her. She didn't, let's be clear, she didn't hit us often, but I have a memory of being very little. I couldn't be more than 4. I have a memory of being very little. I don't even know what I did, but I do know I got beat. And I remember crying and being in my little feelings and her telling me she only did it because she loves me. And that was the thing that they said, right? Because that's what was said to them. But I know my mom loved me as a child. I didn't have questions about whether or not she loved me, but I realized she wasn't very physically affectionate unless something really bad was happening. Unless I was like heartbroken about something. Like I remember being like 12 and this guy I had a crush on, like essentially rejected me, and I remember being so sad, and I remember her hugging me and reassuring me, but that's the only times she really did those things was when I was going through something bad, as opposed to just doing it. You know, me and Diamond were talking about that. I said, when I was a kid, this is weird, but I'm gonna just be honest. When I was a kid, I actually used to like when I would get sick, because that's when my mom was the most nurturing. She was more nurturing when I was unwell. She just kind of treated us like mini adults, if that makes sense. So like we had expectations to meet, and you know, we had these rules to follow and things such as that. But that's what I needed. I needed hugs just because I needed to just lay up. I like to just lay up.
I can definitely relate. That definitely is, I think, is still an unmet need for me in a lot of ways, and something that I'm really, really trying to learn how to give myself. And I know it's an unmet need because it's the two things that I have the hardest time giving to other people, especially like people who I'm in intimate relationships with. And like you said, my mother was a lot more expressive with her disappointment than she ever was with her like verbal affection. And that probably wasn't her fault, because when you pissed off, you pissed off, right? So definitely once I realized like, oh, okay, I'm an adult now, and those things still feel like they're missing, I was like, oh, that's because I didn't get them in my childhood. So yeah, working on that. And for me, it's as simple as, so when I do guided meditations, there are guided meditations online that you can do related to inner child work. And there's one, I'm going to share it. I think I'll share it on our social media, but there is one in particular that I did. And it was so simple and straight to the point, but basically it had you repeat to yourself. I think it was, I love you, I'm sorry, I forgive you, and I'm proud of you. While you were meditating, you had to say it to yourself. I'm not
doing that shit. I'm tired of crying. I'm not doing that shit.
I think you should, though. I think
funny?
Anybody who I talk to that relates to me in terms of that like lack of affection thing, I'd be like, dude, you need to do this guided meditation. I was like,
you know what's so funny? I say those things to myself, but I've never done it in meditation. Like I've said all those words to myself. I've just never done it in meditation. I don't know if I'm ready for that.
It was a lot because in that meditation, that was the first time I think I had ever said that like set of things to myself. Right. And because you're meditating and you're so focused, like it feels genuine and like sincere. And you kind of realize like, oh, wow, I don't talk to myself like this. I don't. So it really was like one of those like, oh, hi, inner child. Nice to meet you type situations where I was like, hey, like, I love you. I'm proud of you. You know, I'm sorry. And I think the I'm sorry part is what got me, because a part of that inner child healing too is acknowledging that there might be things in our past that we needed protection from, and without going into too much detail, because I really try to make it through this season without crying. But there are things in our childhood that many of us needed protection from, and sometimes something as simple as telling yourself like, I'm sorry that nobody protected you from those situations. I'm sorry that you had to experience that. I'm sorry that bad thing happened to you. Like, that was the part that really got me, because obviously if no one else knows what you went through, or if people only finding out now that you're an adult, nobody actually did that for you. Nobody kind of came to your rescue or told you they were sorry or fixed the situation. In my case, there was no punishment for the people that harmed me, so there was no I'm sorry, right? So for me to give that to myself was like,
it's everything. It's everything. You know, it's so funny because I've done that. Like and rather than apologizing or saying, Deidre, I'm sorry these things happened to you, I reassured myself that that's never gonna happen to you again. You know, like, and it's okay. Your fault. That wasn't your fault. You're in charge. You're the grown up now. Like, you got this. But you know, it's funny. My uncle recently apologized to me for things that happened to me that he wasn't around to protect me from. And I'm so glad that I've been doing inner child. Actually, I don't even say that I've been doing inner child healing. I've been actively reparenting my inner child. That's what I've been doing. And because I've been doing that, I was able to receive that and not get emotional. And I'm very grateful for that. Because I feel like if I had heard that for the first time from my uncle, without having done this work, I probably would have been a blubbering mess. So I want to see everybody get to that journey with their inner child. It's actually really fun.
I honestly really do. And if I could leave those of you who are listening with anything, it would be like, visualize who you were as a child. Like, visualize young you, right? It doesn't have to be baby you. It doesn't have to be you at 8 years old. Like, some people's inner child, like Deidre said, is a teenager, because that's when you experience whatever it is you experience, right? For me, I probably
I went through stages with her. I started from infancy, but right now we're at the teenage phase. Right now we're teenagers.
Like, for me, when I picture inner child, I always picture like 8-year-old Haiza, six them parts with it, the six twists,
the four in the
head
front,
with
one in the middle,
with the bobos. Like, I don't always picture that version of myself, because like, that is, you know, the heaviest in terms of things that I'm working to heal, right? Like, that was the time period when things really started. So I'd always picture that person, but a part of me also pictures the teenage me who also experienced some shit, who also went through a lot of things like fat phobia and those feelings of abandonment that I was talking about earlier. Picture that person or those people, and ask yourself, at the time that you were that age, what is it that you needed from the adults in your life? What could you have used the most? And then give that shit to yourself.
I recently read somewhere, so it was shared with me actually, and that fuck brought me to tears. The person you are right now is the person that you would have felt safest with as a child. So you're already giving your inner child all those things without even.
Why that make me emotional?
Why the fuck has sent me? Because the reality is, even when I learned the concept of an inner child, at the time I was at that point where I was speaking really mean to myself when I would make mistakes. But aside from that, the environment that I had already created in my adult life was an environment that I would have felt safe in as a child. And I was like, shoot, it's true. Like, even without having any access to any of this information or any of these insights, the person you are as an adult is the person you would have felt safest with as a child. And if by chance it's not, then that's because your inner child needs some serious healing. I want to share this little story about this piece of art that I have that is actually dedicated to my inner child, because it's a very meaningful piece of art. It's this picture by this artist, Patrick Dower or Doher. He's an amazing artist. A lot of his art is centered around like the Black image, like the image of Black people. And my ex had bought it for me, but it's a beautiful piece. It's gorgeous. He was like, I got it because it makes it, to me, she looks like you. And at first I didn't see it. And there was a point in my reparenting of my inner child where I just stepped back and looked at it, and she looks just like me. It. And yeah. I was like, oh my God, that's me. And I'm like, that's my healed inner child. Because there's even like little parts of her that's like gold. And I'm like, that's all those little cuts and bruises that she picked up on. They're healed now.
I kind of want to hear you guys' stories. If you are also doing inner child work, like I want to know what steps you're taking to heal your inner child, because you might have some insight that Deidre and I haven't tried yet. And
yes.
You know, that our other listeners haven't tried yet.
Post pictures of your child, like you as a child, and tag us, please. Yeah.
Please. Let's see your baby versions of you. Let's talk about our child selves. This week on the podcast. Again, that's at Good Up Pod. You could use hashtag Good Up Tuesday, and we will repost you on our page. Our little cute selves. I can't wait to see them.
Probably so cute. I want to see the glasses and the missing front teeth. Yo, extra points if you have pictures of you with your missing front teeth.
Or if you have yourself with the beads, with a little foil in the end, they used to hold on to the beads. I want to see those too. I want to see those. So yeah, let us see your younger selves. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/gooduppodcast. Thank you to all of our patrons for making this podcast possible and keeping the lights on. And as always, we will see you guys next week. I want to go ahead and say, the season coming to an end soon, but I actually have not been feeling like the season needs to end yet.
No.
So
right now, it still feels good. We'll know when it's time.
Yeah, we'll know when it's time. So this might be our longest season yet. We don't know. So
you know, it's so funny because the other day I found myself feeling a little sad, like, damn, the season wrapping up soon. And I was like, no, it's not. I just kind of stopped myself. I was like, no, it's not.
I was telling myself too, I was like, do we have to end after 12 episodes? And I was like, I'm going to talk to Deidre about it, because something was just like, I don't feel like I don't want to stop yet.
Yeah, not yet. I'm not ready to stop yet.
Well,
if any, hey, y'all don't just have to see us.
Yep, y'all might get a few extra episodes versus how many you had last season. So with that being said, Deidre, tell the people and the inner children then bye.
Bye, kids.
Good Up is hosted and produced by Deidre Ritter and Heiza Quinones Ivory, and is a proud member of the Kickin' It family. Find us on all social media platforms at Good Up Pod. Use hashtag Good Up Tuesday to continue the conversation, and get access to exclusive bonus content at patreon.com/gooduppodcast.